employers will have to pay to remain living wage certified, as well as campaign we have at the county level, which would increase the minimum wage to a living wage or a higher wage than it is presently in Tompkins County, which all of upstate is $15.50 an hour presently. It would go into 16 come January 1st next year. We have a panel here, as you can see, just briefly to say who they are before we get into our first speaker. Kim Demchek, Director of Human Resources for Alternatives Federal Credit Union, to my left. And to Kim's left is Kabir Dodi, Member Experience Associate for Alternatives Federal Credit Union. Ian Greer, to my immediate right, Research Professor and Director of the Ithaca ILR CoLab at Cornell University, as well as Rusty Weaver, to his left, who is the Director of Research at the Cornell ILR CoLab in Buffalo. And Amber Garrity, who is been a cook in Risley Hall for the last 11 years. It's my pleasure to introduce Kim Demchek from Alternatives Federal Credit Union.
Alternatives has supported the living wage in Ithaca for the past 31 years. We are committed to investing in our employees who help make our mission possible. A living wage is more than a paycheck. It's a promise to our employees that they can meet their basic needs, such as food, healthcare, and housing, while creating a work environment where they feel valued and motivated. Organizations who support living wage understand that the well-being of the employees directly contributes to the well-being of the organization and the community in which it serves. A living wage also helps to reduce employee turnover and increase employee engagement. We challenge all other employers to help build a more equitable society where employees, where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to go. Actually, I'm going to switch this around a little bit from the agenda. Let's go to our two workers on the panel who serve to benefit from living wages. First, I'd like to introduce Amber Garrity, who's been a cook at Risley Hall for the last 11 years.
Hi. Thanks for having me. I was asked to come here today and speak on behalf of a single parent who has been working a full-time job since I graduated culinary school back in 2001, trying to raise a child on a livable wage that we're currently making has had its struggles. We've endured it, we've fought through it, we've made it. I'm proud to say my 7-year-old is thriving, doing well in school. I do my best to not let him see the difficulties, but I still, to this day, try to explain to him the financial situation. Even at 7 years old, I want him to understand that we work hard for our money and it should be able to cover the cost of our home, childcare, food. I make just a little bit too much that I can't get any type of assistance or grants or stuff like that. So it would be very helpful to get everybody together to come to see that we deserve to make a livable wage. We are working, we're not sitting around asking for a handout. We are just looking to get what we deserve and what we earn. So, thank you for having me.
Thanks, Amber. I'd like to introduce Kabir Dodi with Alternatives Federal Credit Union. Hope I didn't mess that up.
Hello. So today we discuss our aspirations for Tompkins, for our home and communities, And as we do so, let us embrace the reality for our home, for all its many beautiful sunrises and sunsets, and for its endless armies of potholes, so many potholes, for what it truly is. As reality dictates, we do not each deserve to bring home the same amount of cash for our families. That is our nation's greatest strength and downfall. Just as we here represent a diverse group of people of different backgrounds and occupations, we are diverse people of differing skills, traits, and levels of experience and proficiency. But when we assert the necessity of a living wage amongst our communities, we're not asserting idealistic fantasies for a better tomorrow. We're not even simply asserting a harsh, urgent reality. When we assert the necessity of a living wage, we're asserting a rational necessity. Yes, people need relief from struggle, and the need for such relief is long overdue. Earning a living wage working for Alternatives Federal Credit Union has allowed me livelihood, to enjoy 3 meals a day, to afford my car payments, to somewhat ease my concerns about coming up short on a month's rent, and so forth. These are among the many rights to life every financial responsible, not only Tompkins denizen, but every individual in this great country who doesn't cheat or exploit, but lives their life honestly, working 9 to 5 every day to provide for their family, should be entitled to. And I am grateful to Alternatives for granting me that opportunity. However, a living wage is not an empathetic act, it is a rational business decision. Because my livelihood needs are met, my performance as an AFCU employee is superior to what it would be if such needs were not met. Because I earn enough to live, I can work without being distracted and impeded by hunger, without making some mistakes due to being preoccupied with fears of losing my car or ruining my credit, without giving an inferior member experience due to exhaustion from working a second job out of necessity. Yes, Alternatives may lose funds initially due to paying me a living wage, but it will gain it back and more over time, both via saving time and money and my making less errors, and via bringing in more funds to give back to the community due to my hopefully admirable performance. Businesses need to adjust their framework of thinking towards viewing a living wage as logical, because it's not an act of an emotion, but a declaration of investing in people and what they can become for a community or for a company, and to a broader extent, their community. It is an empirical fact proven repeatedly throughout history that society flourishes when people can look beyond past meeting their basic survival needs into the great beyond of possibility. Since Alternatives providing me of a living wage satisfies my needs to live, I can financially afford to look to the future in ways I couldn't with previous employers. I'm currently nearing finishing my AFCU sponsored studies to be a certified credit union financial counselor, something I had previously wished to achieve but had not been afforded the resources to pursue. Following its completion, I'm eager to pursue my notary license. Due to my satisfaction as an employee, I'm eager to further my career with my current organization, saving the organization the cost of training a new individual to replace me up towards my current ability level, as well as being trained upwards in-house, an environment fostering superior employees experienced in the organization's practices and standards. The harsh truth of reality still exists. Each of us do not deserve to bring home the same amount of money to our families. Some of us will live our lives better off, some of us worse off than our peers, and that is both the beauty and disgrace that is living in this country. But each and every one of us deserves the opportunity to try to pursue that life of financial comfort we so choose. The opportunity to go to bed in our current lives today and to wake up tomorrow seeking the life we desire. And while the living wage figures nationwide still have avenue for improvement, institutions that strive to meet a living wage for their employees, such as Alternatives Federal Credit Union, grants us all that opportunity to seek a better tomorrow for ourselves and for our families. Thank you.
Now for our two ILR collab people, I would like to introduce Ian Greer and Rusty Weaver and let you two take it from here.
Thanks, Pete, and thanks everyone for your testimony. It's such an honor as an academic researcher to be involved in this calculation, and which has such an impact on what employers do and what workers demand, possibly also what elected people do with the minimum wage. So, without further ado, I'm going to tell you this year's number. It is $24.82 an hour. So that is $9.32 more than the minimum wage around here, which is currently $15.50. So Rusty Weaver is going to, who's sitting next to me, is going to talk some more about how that number is calculated and the research and analysis that is based upon. Let me just say a few words. First, this is a big increase. It's a 34.5% increase over last time we calculated this number. We presented it here in this Union Hall back in November 2023. Why is there a big increase? Well, it's because there was a big increase in the cost of living, and Rusty will unpack that for you in a minute. Some people might think that the number is kind of high. Other people will think that it's quite low. So one thing about the number that's important to understand is it is calculated based on a basic needs budget. So I have a teenage daughter, and her definition of the word basic is average or normal. But this is not an average, this is not based on average expenditures. This is based on the assumption that low-wage, low-income people are spending below average. So it's based on expenditures from a single-person household, no kids, does not include childcare. If it did include childcare, it would be much higher, and you can see the numbers in the report. The final thing I want to say is there are a lot of wage earners around here who are making less than $24.82. It's almost half of the wage earners. 47.4% of workers are making less than a living wage. That's 23,000 people. And as always, there are big racial disparities. So 64.3% of Black workers are making less than a living wage, 56.2% of Latinx workers, 49.9% of women. So wages are not keeping up with the cost of living is one of the takeaways of this. And another one is that the impact of this is involves really stark racial disparities and gender disparities as well. Okay, over to you, Rusty Weaver.
Thank you for having me. And first, I just want to acknowledge both Alternatives FCU and the Tompkins County Workers Center. They've been doing this work a lot longer than Ian and I. We jumped in the game for the last calculation, and we're very, very grateful for that. And so what we've done is just build on that tradition of Alternatives FCU and the Tompkins County Workers Center computing this living wage number year in and year out. And so the way that we went about it, the way we went about it the last time we put a number together and the way we went about it this time is to go in and access data that business owners typically have access to, and not the general public. Business owners often purchase localized expenditure data on how consumers in a given market region are spending their money. And they do that so they understand whether or not they're going to have a return on their investments, whether they're going to set up shop in that location. That data is private, it's behind a paywall, but fortunately we work for a university that subscribes to these services. And so we go through and we capture localized regional expenditure data on a number of basic needs categories. There are 9 specific categories that we look at in the calculation. They're detailed in the report, and they're your basic needs: housing, food, clothing, communication, healthcare. We have a line item for savings as well, and taxes. And so we capture data from, because it's localized and because businesses, again, are looking at typical patterns of expenditures, we get what expenditures are for a typical household. And as Ian said, that's not where we're computing the living wage from, because that would be a much larger number. So instead, we have to take that typical information and we have to look at empirical patterns of what low wage earners in Tompkins County earn relative to a typical salary. And so based on that, we're able to adjust expenditures down by assuming that, for example, if a single person household who qualifies for a housing subsidy through HUD, 80% of area median income is earning about $60,000, but a typical household is earning about $110,000, we can adjust for that by taking the ratio and look at typical expenditures and think about how we would adjust that down for a single person, relatively low to moderate income household. And that's what we've done in the table. For those of you who haven't had access to it, there are hard copies of the report up here. You can feel free to grab one. In table 1 of that report, we break down these expenditures by category to show you what a typical, as Ian said, basic or low to moderate income individual household would be spending in these category areas. We then take that, we add it all up to think about what a basic needs budget would be for a month. And then we assume that a full-time worker works 2,080 hours a year, 40 hours a week for 52 weeks, and we just do the math. We back in then to what the hourly calculation would be, and that came out to this year, $24.82. For those of you who do follow living wage policy and living wage analyses, you're probably also familiar that there is a national living wage calculator produced by researchers at MIT. The current MIT living wage for a single individual with no children in Tompkins County is $25.35 per hour. So again, we're kind of right there with comparable measures. Another way that we try to look at what a cost of living might be for a basic needs budget in an area is by looking at, I've already mentioned HUD, and I'm sorry I didn't spell that out, it's the Department of Housing and Urban Development. That's the agency that puts out fair market rent numbers for every locality, every county basically in the United States. That determines, it's basically the rate at which a low-income household would be expected to pay for housing for a given month based on their income. If you're familiar with the term housing cost burden, that typically means, again, by federal definitions, a household is expected to pay no more than 30% of their gross monthly income on housing. Otherwise, they wouldn't have enough resources available for other basic needs. Sadly, there are a lot of households that do pay over that 30% threshold. But one thing that we can do is take that guideline from federal policy and say that if we assume that we want everybody to pay no more than 30% of their income on housing, what would a housing wage be? What would a living wage be for low-income housing? Currently, and this is where you live in this community, I do not, so you've probably noticed housing prices and housing costs going up pretty rapidly. But since the last time we put this number together, the monthly increase for a one-bedroom low-income, 80% of AMI income household would be $1,489 per month, nearly $1,500 a month for a one-bedroom, compared to when we did this last time, which was just over $1,200 a month. That's a big increase in and of itself. And so if we take that number and we say, what would 30% of my income be if that was my rent price? The housing wage for this area would be like $28.46 per hour. So again, like Ian said, some people will think the number that we computed is high, some will think it's too low, but it is within this range of other comparable numbers for living wages for this community. And so that is how we got there. It's again, not hand waving or us just throwing darts at a dartboard and trying to figure out what number will stick. And so table 1 again will break down each expenditure category for you. And then there are comparable data points later in the report that talk about these other living wages for the community to see how they compare. As Ian already said, what we did with that number then is using data from the US Census Bureau, where individuals are self-reporting the number of hours they work, the number of weeks they work, their race, ethnicity, gender, and their earnings. We use that data set to compute an effective hourly wage for every resident of Tompkins County, and that's where we get to the numbers of nearly half of workers in the county are earning below this hourly wage on average. And as Ian already said, there are a number of disparities in that earnings pattern. So again, this is how we got to the number. The number is in line with other comparable data points, and it does give us this sense that in Tompkins County for workers to get to that number, for more folks to be earning a living wage. Action is going to be necessary because there are so many, like Ian said, 23,000 people who are computed to be earning less than that wage right now. So that is everything on how we computed it. Happy to answer questions.
Questions, thoughts? Wes?
Thank you for figuring all this out. I do have a question. Not everyone is single. There are some people who are in